Shanghai Composite in China tumbled on Monday alongside the Hang Seng in Hong Kong. This plunge is dragged by healthcare stocks in the banking sector after shadow banking conglomerate Zhongzhi Enterprise Group filed for bankruptcy liquidation late Friday. The conglomerate is unable to repay its debt amid a deepening real estate crisis in the country. Shadow banks in China operate by pooling household and corporate savings to offer loans to invest in real estate, stocks, bonds and commodities, and they have often financed many large Chinese property developers. On-bank debt is something that the Chinese government has been watching very closely, trying to limit its growth. But the largest banks in China are state-owned, making it harder for non-state-owned businesses to tap traditional banks and therefore making a case for shadow banks. Tim Waterer is chief market analyst at KCM Trade. He says that shadow banks have played a key part in the economic growth of China. Take a listen.
I'm not expecting sweeping changes, and that's because that shadow banking sector has played a large role in the Chinese economic growth over the past 15 years. So the problem is if you go in with some hard regulation now, it'll dry up credit to the troubled property sector, and that could amplify the problems we're seeing in that sector at the moment. So I think if we do see any changes, there'll be more of the finesse variety, because as we know, the shadow banking industry, they operate by a different set of rules. So, the pros are that sectors of the economy can get an easier line of credit, but on the flip side, that lack of capital and liquidity control can mean things can go pear-shaped, and that's what we've seen basically in the past few days. So I think, in terms of, there are risks on both sides. If the authorities in China, if they go too hard on regulation, that has a risk. If they, leave the status quo, then we could see other companies follow suit with Zhongzhi. So risks on both sides, but I think, given the risk is weighted to the downside, I guess you could say, if they come into some sort of heavy regulation. So we could see a little bit of, quasi-involvement there in terms of some minor regulatory changes. But, I think it's a tricky one. But, investors will certainly be keeping an eye on things to see whether there are any other companies making the headlines for the wrong reasons as a result of that struggling property sector.
Right, and onto the property sector now, because we know that China's property market has been plagued by a debt crisis since 2020. Do you think that dust has started to settle on that front?
I wouldn't be confident in saying that yet. You're right, it has been certainly the Achilles heel, I think, of that, the much touted or anticipated Chinese economic recovery. It really hasn't got going to the extent we would have hoped, and that is largely because of that struggle in the property sector, which accounts for around 25% of China's overall economic output. So it has an oversized impact on the Chinese economic fortunes. So I think the problem we've got right now is that while the PBOC, they have announced measures to try and target the shoring up the property sector this year, that's going to take some time to take effect. It could be 6 months away before we start seeing some positive signs in terms of the fiscal programs and lowering of fees and those types of measures. So in the meantime, I think it's a case of trying to stem the bleeding so that we don't get any sort of other large-scale companies. But there's certainly the risk that could still happen. I think, from an investment point of view, we're watching to see, are there more dominoes to fall on that front? And that remains to be answered.
And now let's go to the top story from around the world. Shares in Evergrande's electric vehicle manufacturing arm plunged as much as 23% after its vice chairman was detained by authorities. China Evergrande New Energy Vehicle Group said Liu Yongzhu was detained on suspicion of illegal activities but did not elaborate further. Evergrande, the world's most indebted company, launched the unit in 2019 as part of its expansion out of the real estate sector. While safety checks are ongoing, some Boeing 737 MAX 9 planes have returned to service at Alaska Airlines after inspection revealed no problems. The airline apologized for the grounding, and investigations are underway regarding previous warning alerts on the jet. Meanwhile, the missing part of the Alaska Airlines plane that experienced a mid-air blowout on Friday has been located in a backyard in Portland. And Germany's train drivers' union, GDL, is calling for a 3-day strike this week in a bid to push through higher wages and shorter working hours. German rail passengers have experienced widespread delays and cancellations in recent months after the GDL called its members to stop operating on some days. Train operator Deutsche Bahn said it will seek an injunction to stop the walkouts this week.